Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue sharing stories that touch the heart. Now let me ask you something. What would you do if you saw someone from your past holding a truth you never knew existed? That's exactly what happened to one man on a hot summer day in Boston. He thought he had everything until he realized what he was missing. This is a story of redemption, fatherhood, and the beautiful mess of second chances. So sit back, close your eyes, and let the story carry you away. The July sun in Boston was merciless. Heat shimmered off the asphalt as if the whole city were wrapped in a fever dream. Horns blared along Commonwealth Avenue, where traffic had clogged into a lifeless river of luxury cars, delivery vans, and tourists with no clue where they were headed. In the middle of this chaos, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom edged toward the curb, its sleek exterior reflecting the sharp sunlight like a mirror. The rear door opened, and a tall man in a pale gray suit stepped out. Grayson Wilder adjusted the cuffs of his shirt as he glanced around with faint irritation. Boston was his hometown, but he hadn't walked these streets in over 6 years. Back then, he'd been a young man with nothing but a dream and a beat-up laptop. Now, at 38, he was the CEO of WelderTech, a multinational tech empire worth billions. His shoes were Italian, his watch a limited edition Patek Philippe Wacom, and yet in that moment, his hair slightly tousled by the breeze, his briefcase in hand, he looked more like a lost traveler than the titan he was. "I'll walk from here," he told his driver with a wave. "But sir, the penthouse is still a mile away, I know, but I need the air." He gave a small smirk, or at least whatever passes for it in this part of the city. The car disappeared into traffic. Grayson exhaled deeply and began walking. The city had changed. There were new buildings, more noise, more people. But beneath the clamor was something oddly familiar. It wasn't nostalgia, not exactly. More like a distant chord being plucked somewhere in the background of his life. His phone buzzed, a reminder of his upcoming board meeting. Another acquisition, more zeros added to his bottom line. He silenced the alert without looking. His thoughts were already drifting. The last time he'd walked this part of town was with her. He tried to shove the thought away, but her name whispered itself anyway. Lena. He hadn't said that name out loud in 6 years. They had said goodbye on a rainy October night. He'd promised to write, to call, but 2 months later his startup caught fire in Silicon Valley, and he'd boarded a plane to Tokyo for funding. That plane ride turned into a whirlwind of meetings, growth, and eventual power. 1 year turned into 2, then 6. Lena had slowly become a ghost, one he'd buried under meetings, mergers, and million-dollar decisions, until now. As he passed a small strip mall anchored by a Walmart, something made him pause. It wasn't the store or the crowd loitering near the entrance. It was a voice, a soft, exasperated voice trying to herd chaos. "Lucas, don't run. Milo, give your brother back his juice box. Theo, please, just stay close to me for 1 second." Grayson turned his head, his heart suddenly pounding. There she was, Lena. Her hair was longer, pulled into a messy braid. Her sundress clung to her in the summer heat. She held 2 grocery bags in one arm and tried to wrangle 3 small boys with the other. The kids, all around 6, were talking over each other, bouncing with energy, darting in and out of her reach. Grayson stared, not just at Lena, but at the boys. The shape of their eyes, their sandy brown hair, the dimple that appeared on one boy's cheek when he laughed, the serious way another furrowed his brows when examining a bug on the sidewalk. Grayson knew those features. They were his. His breath caught. Time slowed. He took one cautious step forward, then another. The world faded into a hum behind him. Cars, voices, heat waves off the concrete. All that existed was the woman he once loved, and the children he didn't know he had. A boy noticed him first. He tugged on Lena's hand and whispered, "Mom, who's that man staring at us?" Lena looked up. Her eyes locked on Grayson, and in an instant, her entire face changed. Shock, confusion, pain, and something deeper, something that looked a lot like fear. She didn't speak his name. She didn't have to. He took a step forward. "Lena." She tightened her grip on the grocery bags, glanced at the boys. "We need to go," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "Wait," he said, hoarse. "Can we talk?" Lena hesitated. Then, fumbling through her purse, she pulled out a crumpled receipt and scribbled something on it. Without a word, she shoved it into his hand. Noon, tomorrow. Cafe Dahlia on Tremont Street. And then she was gone, hustling the boys into a rideshare, vanishing into the blur of traffic and sunlight, leaving Grayson standing there, heart in his throat, fingers still clutching the piece of paper. He looked down at it. The ink was smudged with sweat and the number barely legible. But the truth was clear. Those boys were his. The next morning, Grayson arrived at Cafe Dahlia 30 minutes early. The small corner cafe had hardly changed, its warm brick walls and flower boxes clinging to the windows like something out of a storybook. It had always been Lena's favorite suite, tucked between towering office buildings like a quiet sigh in the middle of the city's chaos. Grayson chose a table near the window, his hands wrapped tightly around a porcelain cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. The seconds crawled by. His reflection in this glass stared back. Tired eyes, a jaw clenched too tightly, a suit too formal for the occasion. He hadn't slept, not after yesterday. His mind had been a reel of questions playing over and over. Were they really his? Why hadn't she told him? Was this punishment for disappearing? Did she try to reach out, or had she just decided to raise them alone? At exactly 12 p.m., the door opened. Lena stepped inside. She wore a soft cream blouse, a pair of faded jeans, and a look that spoke of both resolve and weariness. Her eyes met his instantly, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then slowly she crossed the cafe, pulled out the chair opposite him, and sat down. "You look tired," she said simply, folding her hands in front of her. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Neither did I." Silence settled between them like a thick, unspoken fog. Grayson didn't know where to begin. Words felt clumsy, useless. So he started with the only question that mattered. "Are they mine?" Lena didn't flinch. She looked him square in the eyes and nodded. "Yes, Lucas, Milo, and Theo are your sons." Grayson's heart clenched. Hearing it confirmed out loud wasn't a relief. It was an earthquake. He took a deep breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, Grayson," she said, and for the first time he heard the pain laced in her voice. "I called, I emailed, I even showed up at your old office. Your assistant wouldn't let me in." He blinked, stunned. You came to the office? Twice. I never got anything." She gave a bitter laugh. "You think I didn't try to you think I wanted to do this alone?" The words hit harder than he expected. She continued, her voice quieter now, but shaking with emotion. "I found out I was pregnant a month after you left. I panicked. I tried to reach you, but every door was shut. By the time I realized you'd moved to Tokyo permanently, I was 5 months in and sick every day. I made a choice. I decided I couldn't chase someone who had already left." Grayson lowered his eyes, shame pooling in his chest like cement. "I was stupid. I thought we were just putting things on pause, that I'd come back and things would fall into place." "Well, life doesn't wait around to be resumed, Grayson," Lena said, her voice calm now but weary. He looked up at her again, truly seeing her this time, not just the woman he had loved, but the mother she had become. There were tired lines under her eyes, but they were beautiful in their own way, etched by years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and strength. "They're beautiful," he just said quietly. "All three of them. I saw myself in them, and it terrified me." A flicker of emotion crossed Lena's face, maybe softness, maybe regret, but it passed. "You can't just show up now and expect to be their father." "I know," Grayson said, "but I want to try." She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, watching the light flicker through the leaves. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful. "They don't know you. They've asked about you, of course, especially lately. I always told them the truth, what I knew. That their dad loved someone once, but went away. That I didn't know if he'd ever come back." Her throat caught slightly. "Now you're here, and I have to protect them." Grayson nodded. "Then let me earn that right. Let me show them. Show you. I'll go slow. On your terms." Another long pause. Then softly she said, "Come to the house. Friday at 6 p.m. You can meet them properly. I'll tell them tonight. But Grayson, if you hurt them, If you disappoint them, I won't let you come back. I understand, he said, voice thick with emotion. She stood up, paused, and reached into her purse. She slid a note across the table, her address. As she walked away, the scent of vanilla and sunshine lingered behind her. Grayson sat still, the note trembling in his fingers. In just 2 days, he would walk through her door not as a businessman, not as a billionaire, but as a stranger trying to become a father. Friday arrived with a strange kind of electricity in the air. Grayson stood outside a modest 2-story house in Brighton, a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood miles away from the world he usually occupied. Boardrooms, private jets, and glass towers that scraped the sky. Here, wind chimes tinkled softly from porch eaves. A pink tricycle lay tipped over in the grass. The homes were close together, the driveways narrow, the air scented with grilled food and late summer flowers. He was early. His phone read 5:53 p.m. In his hand, he held 3 identical gift bags. Inside, a carefully selected model airplane for each boy. Lena had mentioned their fascination with flight in one of her brief texts. He had spent hours picking the right ones. Not too childish, not too complex, something they could build together, if he was ever lucky enough to be invited back. For the 10th time, Grayson checked his reflection in the car's side mirror. No suit per Lena's instructions, just a button-down shirt and slacks. He looked ordinary, a stranger trying to be less intimidating. He walked up the front steps, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it would echo when he rang the doorbell. It chimed, cheerful and completely at odds with the nerves screaming inside him. Then the door opened. Lena stood there, calm but serious. She looked at him for a second, assessing, maybe measuring how much of the old Grayson remained, and stepped aside. "You're on time," she said. "I didn't want to mess up the first 5 minutes," he replied. She led him down a short hallway. The walls were covered in crayon drawings, handprint art, and photos of 3 nearly identical boys at a pumpkin patch, blowing out birthday candles, sitting in matching pajamas on Christmas morning. Every image made his throat tighten. "They're in the living room," she said softly. "I told them you're someone I used to care about, someone who just found out he's their father." He nodded, unable to find his voice. And then he saw them. 3 boys sat on a well-worn couch, one cross-legged with a comic book, another fiddling with Lego bricks, and the third bouncing a tennis ball off the floor. They all looked up when Lena cleared her throat. "Boys," she said gently, "this is Grayson Wilder. He's your dad." Silence fell. 3 pairs of wide eyes stared at him, and time seemed to freeze. The one with the comic book stood up first. "I'm Lucas," he said, offering a small but confident handshake. "I'm the oldest, by like 4 minutes." Grayson knelt to shake his hand. "It's very nice to meet you, Lucas." "I like planes," the boy added, "and pizza. Do you like pizza?" "Love it," Grayson replied, his smile wobbling. The second boy, a bit quieter, set his Legos down and walked over. "I'm Milo," he said, eyes studying Grayson like a scientist with a microscope. "You look like me." Grayson chuckled, feeling the emotion stir just under the surface. "I was thinking the same thing." The third boy, still seated, crossed his arms. "I'm Theo," he said flatly. "How come you never came before?" The question hit like a dart to the chest. "I didn't know about you," Grayson answered honestly. "But now that I do, I'm here. And I want to be around, if you'll let me." Theo didn't respond. He looked down at the tennis ball in his lap and bounced it again, harder this time. Grayson reached into his bag and pulled out the gifts. "I brought something. For each of you. Model airplanes. I thought maybe we could build them together one day." Lucas's face lit up. "Cool." Milo nodded, already peeking into his bag. "Are they the kind with decals?" "Theo," Lena prompted gently, "do you want to see yours?" "I guess," the boy muttered, taking it without looking up. They sat together for the next hour, talking about planes, superheroes, what school was like. Lucas was bold and talkative, constantly interrupting his brothers to ask more questions. Milo was more observant, quieter, but sharp. Theo remained distant, always a few beats behind, suspicion lingering in his every glance. As the boys raced to show Grayson their science projects and favorite Lego builds, Lena stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching him. Not with anger, not even judgment, but wariness. The same look you might give a man who once disappeared in the night and now claimed he wanted to stay for breakfast. When bedtime came and the boys shuffled off reluctantly, Milo paused in the hallway and looked up at him. "Are you coming back?" Grayson knelt beside him. "I'd like to, if that's okay with you." Milo nodded slowly. "Okay, just not too early. Saturdays are for cartoons." Grayson grinned. "I'll keep that in mind." When the house was quiet, Lena walked him to the door. Her arms were now wrapped across her chest, defensive, but not closed off. "You handled that better than I expected," she said. "They're amazing, Lena. You've done an incredible job." Her expression softened, if only slightly. "They have a baseball game tomorrow. Lucas is playing. The others usually just argue over snacks. I'd love to come." 10 sharp, Franklin Park. She handed him a slip of paper with the field number. As she opened the door, he turned to her and said, voice barely above a whisper, "Thank you for today, for not slamming the door in my face." She looked at him for a long moment. "I wanted to," she said, and then softer, "but they deserve the chance to know you." As Grayson stepped into the warm night air, he realized something strange. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about a quarterly report or stock market alerts. He was thinking about 3 small faces and how much they'd changed him in a single hour. Saturday morning dawned bright and blue-skied, the kind of early August day where everything feels just a little more hopeful. Grayson arrived at Franklin Park a full 30 minutes before the game began. He wasn't sure what the protocol was: bring orange slices, folding chairs, team colors. He had settled for a cooler full of juice boxes and a blanket under one arm, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt that felt alien compared to his usual buttoned-up wardrobe. The field was already humming with life, coaches shouting instructions, parents chatting under umbrellas, siblings playing tag along the bleachers. Grayson stood awkwardly for a moment, searching. Then he spotted them. Lena stood near the dugout with the boys. Lucas wore a too-big baseball jersey tucked haphazardly into his pants and a cap tilted sideways, his glove already on the wrong hand. Milo clutched a book under one arm and shaded his eyes with the other. Theo stood with crossed arms and a juice pouch, clearly unimpressed. Lena looked up and saw him. He gave a small wave. She nodded, eyes scanning his outfit, clearly noting the absence of any designer label. "Hey," he said as he approached. "You're early," she replied. "I didn't want to miss anything." Lucas noticed him next and ran over, eyes wide. "You came." "I promised I would." "I'm playing second base," he announced. "That's where the action happens. I'll be watching every second." Grayson set up his blanket at the edge of the bleachers. The game began with the expected chaos: missed balls, confused base running, and more cheering from parents than actual plays. But none of that mattered, because when Lucas caught his first grounder cleanly, he turned not to his coach, but to Grayson. "Did you see that?" he called out across the field. Grayson stood up, hands cupped around his mouth. "I sure did. That was amazing." "Did you hear that?" Lucas whispered to his teammate. "My dad saw it." Grayson sat slowly, heart full. That one sentence echoed louder than any business accolade he'd ever received. Lena took a seat beside him, handing Theo another snack as Milo read a comic book quietly. "They're really happy you came," she said after a while. Grayson turned to her. "So am I." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lucas chase fly balls and wave unnecessarily between innings. It wasn't perfect. He tripped over his shoelaces once, got distracted by a butterfly, and forgot to run on a base hit. But none of it mattered. He was a kid, his kid. After the game, the team huddled and cheered, and Lucas jogged over, beaming. "We won. Did you see my throw?" "I saw everything," Grayson said, kneeling to meet him at eye level. "You were incredible out there." Lucas grinned, sweaty and sun-soaked. "Can we get ice cream now? That's what we do after games." Grayson looked to Lena. She gave a soft smile. "It's a tradition." 20 minutes later, they sat outside a tiny neighborhood ice cream stand. The boys devoured their cones, sitting on a bench with sticky fingers and wide smiles. Milo pointed out constellations in the sprinkles on his scoop. Theo licked his slowly, glancing occasionally at Grayson when he thought no one was looking. "Are you going to live with us now?" Lucas asked suddenly, the question so casual it took Grayson's breath away. Grayson hesitated, Lena looked up, startled. Well, he began gently, I have my own place, but I'd like to spend a lot of time with you, if that's okay. Like sleepovers? Milo asked. With waffles? Grayson chuckled. If your mom agrees, I'll bring the syrup. Theo stared at his cone. You're busy, though, he muttered. Mom says you're really important. I used to think I was, Grayson said, turning toward him. But lately I'm starting to realize what really matters. Theo didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. Progress. When the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the clouds in hues of orange and gold, Grayson stood with Lena as the boys piled into her car. Lucas has another game next week, she said quietly, and there's a school performance on Friday. Theo plays piano. He's nervous about it. I'll be there, Grayson said without hesitation. Tell me what time, and I'll be front row. Lena looked at him long and hard. If you're going to do this, really do this, you need to show up every time. I know. I'm not going to let you waltz in and out of their lives when it suits you. He swallowed hard. You won't have to. As she drove away, Grayson stood watching the taillights disappear. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Emails, messages, investment alerts. But for the first time, he didn't care. 3 boys had called him dad today. And nothing, not his billion-dollar company, not his boardroom battles, not even his ambitions, could ever compare to that. Friday arrived far too quickly, and with it, the storm that had been building all week. Grayson stood at the floor-to-ceiling window in his downtown office, staring out at the Boston skyline, his mind far from quarterly earnings or investor calls. Behind him, his executive team shuffled papers, whispered anxiously, and tapped their phones. The company's biggest investor from Singapore had just flown in for an emergency meeting, and it was scheduled for 6:30 p.m., the same time as Theo's piano recital. Grayson had been trying to avoid the conflict all week, juggling, rescheduling, pleading with assistants, but the meeting had landed there like a concrete weight, and now, with only hours to go, he was being forced to choose. On his desk, nestled between leather-bound folders and glowing screens, sat a drawing, a lopsided grand piano drawn in colored pencil. Above it, the words written in crooked 6-year-old handwriting, My dad will be there. One Mr. Theo. It had been in his briefcase all week. He carried it like a secret shield, reminding him of what mattered. At 3:45 p.m., Lena texted, Don't forget, 6:30 sharp. Theo was nervous. He's been practicing on all week. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and stared at it like it wasn't nearly enough. Victoria, his COO, knocked lightly on his door. The Singapore team is in the boardroom. Grayson turned to face her, jaw tight. And? They want to renegotiate key terms. Pulling out is still on the table. She paused. Alex, this meeting is critical. He knew that. Everyone knew that. This deal had the power to unlock global expansion, increase revenue by double digits, and cement WilderTech as a generational leader in AI. But at what cost? He glanced at the clock. 4:02 p.m. Theo would be changing into his little blazer soon, probably humming the opening notes of the piece he'd practiced for weeks, maybe wondering with his serious eyes and hopeful heart if his dad would actually show. Grayson picked up the piano drawing, folded it carefully, and slid it into the inner pocket of his suit. I'll give them 1 hour, he said firmly. No more. Victoria blinked. That's not how this works. It is now, he said. Block out the hour, set a hard stop at 5:30. And just like that, the man who once negotiated billion-dollar deals with 15-hour meetings and red-eye flights to Tokyo walked into that boardroom with one thing on his mind. Theo's recital. The meeting was tense. Questions, doubts, numbers flying back and forth. Grayson answered quickly, thoroughly, but never let the clock slip from his mind. When it hit 5:32 p.m., he stood. I have to go. Mr. Tan, the Singapore lead, frowned. Mr. Wilder, we are not finished. Grayson nodded. Then we'll finish tomorrow. Or not. That's your choice. You would walk out now, in the middle of this? Yes, Grayson said, because my son is playing the piano in front of strangers tonight, and I promised I would be there. A beat of silence. Then Grayson turned and walked out, his team stunned, his investors furious, but his heart thundering with clarity. He raced to his car, sped through city traffic, and pulled up in front of the small school auditorium at exactly 6:27 p.m. The parking lot was full. The hallway inside was echoing with the chatter of proud parents and fidgeting siblings. He spotted Lena near the front row. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "You made it." "Of course I did," he said, breathless. "I said I would." Theo wasn't sure. Before she could finish, the lights dimmed. Children filed onto the stage, all small tuxedos and nervous bows. Theo sat at the piano, eyes scanning the crowd. When his gaze landed on Grayson, he paused. Then he smiled, a small, lopsided, shy smile. Grayson's throat tightened as Theo adjusted his sheet music, placed his tiny fingers on the keys, and began to play. It wasn't perfect. A few notes stumbled. One section slowed too much. But it was beautiful, because every note was filled with effort, bravery, and hope. When Theo finished, the applause was thunderous, especially from the man in the front row standing without hesitation, clapping harder than anyone else. Backstage afterward, Theo ran straight into his arms. "You came." Grayson knelt, gathering him close. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Theo pulled back and looked at him seriously. "Did your work people get mad?" Grayson nodded. "Very." Theo thought for a moment. "Are you in trouble?" Grayson smiled. "Maybe, but the good kind." Later, outside under the stars, Lena stood beside him as the boys ran ahead. "That meeting, wasn't it important?" "Not as important as this." Yeah, she studied him, skeptical. "You're really changing." "I have to," he said simply. And he meant it. Not just for Theo, not just for Lena, but for himself. Monday morning arrived like a thunderstorm wrapped in a business suit. Grayson barely stepped into the elevator at Wilder Tech before Victoria, clipboard in hand and jaw clenched, was beside him. "They're furious," she said. "I figured. You walked out on the biggest investor meeting of the year." I walked into my son's recital. Victoria gave him a look that was half admiration, half disbelief. "I hope it was worth it." It was. The elevator doors opened to chaos. Emails had exploded overnight. Mr. Tan from Singapore had threatened to pull funding. The board was demanding an emergency session. Investors were calling it a leadership crisis. Grayson didn't flinch. He walked into his office, removed his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and called for a full executive meeting. An hour later, his entire senior team sat in the glass conference room, murmuring nervously. Charts flickered on a projector behind them. Red numbers, trends, losses, risks. But Grayson didn't look at the screen. He looked at his people. "You all know what happened Friday," he began. There were awkward nods. "I made a choice to leave a boardroom and go sit on a folding chair in a school auditorium." No one spoke. "I missed a deal. We might lose funding. We might lose investors." He paused. "But I didn't miss my son's piano solo." Still no one spoke. "I've spent 16 years building this company," he continued. "And in doing so, I've built a culture that rewards burnout, demands availability, and punishes anything that even looks like a boundary." He let that sink in. "I was wrong." Victoria shifted slightly in her chair. "I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I missed life. And this weekend, for the first time, I saw it clearly." He walked to the projector and clicked the slide. A new image appeared. It wasn't a chart. It was a rough sketch, a campus with wide green lawns, walking paths, a daycare, a school building next to an office wing. It looked more like a university than a tech company. "This is the Bennett Family Innovation Campus," he said. A few heads tilted in confusion. "It's the future of Wilder Tech. It's where we work and live, where we build and belong, where we remember that our employees aren't just professionals. They're parents, spouses, caregivers, people." A murmur ran through the room. Victoria cleared her throat. "Grayson, this is ambitious, bold, but the cost—" "I'll fund the first phase personally," he said. Gasps. "My penthouse? Gone. My vacation properties? Sold. I've got enough wealth to live 5 lifetimes. I want to invest in one that matters." He turned back to the room. "I'm asking for your support, not just for the campus, but for a change in culture, flexible schedules, no emails after hours, protected time for family, leadership that starts with presence, not power." Silence. Then Victoria stood up. I have 4-year-old twins, she said quietly. Last month I missed their first dance recital because I was here, working on a pitch deck. I told myself it was worth it. She looked down, then back up. It wasn't. Grayson gave her a small nod. Another voice joined in. The head of product. My dad never made it to my games, not once. I told myself I'd be different. He looked at Grayson. Let's build it. One by one, the room began to shift. Heads nodded, eyebrows raised, not just approval, but belief. They wanted this, not for PR, not for buzz, for themselves, for their kids, for something they didn't know they were missing. Until now. Grayson's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Lena. Caleb's school called. Asthma attack. I'm taking him to Mass General. He stood up without hesitation. Victoria, you're in charge of the follow-up. I have somewhere to be. He left the room without another word, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with purpose. When he arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, Lena was pacing the waiting area. Ryan and Milo sat quietly beside her. He's with the nurses, she said. He had trouble breathing during recess. They're doing everything they can. Grayson didn't hesitate. He sat beside her and took her hand. She didn't pull away. When the doctor emerged an hour later and said Caleb was stable but needed overnight monitoring, Grayson didn't leave. He stayed. He held Caleb's tiny hand and read aloud from his favorite book. He ordered soup for Lena and made up a story about an inventor dad and his 3 superhero sons. That night, as the city lights twinkled outside the hospital window, he watched Caleb sleep and knew something deep in his bones. He wasn't a visitor in this family anymore. He was home. The following morning, the hospital room was quiet. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, casting golden stripes across Caleb's small sleeping form. Grayson sat slumped in the visitor chair, his jacket draped over him like a blanket, eyes closed but not sleeping. He had stayed up all night, watching over his son. His son. That phrase still startled him. Not for its meaning, but for how deeply it had begun to matter. Lena stirred on the couch across the room, stretching her arms and blinking the sleep from her eyes. She looked over at Grayson, her gaze softening. You stayed. Of course I did, he murmured. She sat up. The board vote is today, isn't it? He nodded. Noon. She hesitated, then asked, will you go? Grayson looked at Caleb, then back at her. I don't know yet. As if on cue, his phone buzzed on the table. Victoria. The board is gathering. Tan's camp is rallying against the campus plan. We need you. He stared at the message for a long time, then stood slowly. I have to go, but I'll come back. Lena nodded. I know. An hour later, Grayson walked into the WalderTech boardroom with dark circles under his eyes and the quiet gravity of a man who had weathered a storm no one else could see. The board was already seated, 14 people in tailored suits, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, irritation, and unease. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Howard Ashton, cleared his throat. Mr. Wilder, we're all aware of your proposal, he said, glancing at a printed packet titled Family First Initiative, but some of us are still unsure why this dramatic change is necessary. Grayson stepped forward and placed a single sheet on the table. It wasn't a chart, not a market trend, not a profit forecast. It was a photo of Theo, sitting at a small school piano in a crooked bow tie, hands poised, looking into the crowd with hope in his eyes. This, Grayson said, his voice low but steady, is why. The room shifted. He took a breath. For years, I believed success was built on sacrifice, that if I worked harder, faster, longer, I could buy happiness. I was wrong. The cost wasn't in money. It was in moments. First steps, first words, bedtime stories, recitals. He looked around the room. We built a company that measures productivity in hours logged and deals closed. But it's time to redefine success. He clicked the next slide, a rendering of the Bennett Family Innovation Campus. It's not just a building, it's a statement that our employees are more than their resumes, that family matters, that we don't have to choose between love and ambition. As he spoke, he felt it, not just the pressure to persuade, but a deeper calling, a sense that this was more than a business proposal. It was a legacy, a chance to leave something behind that wasn't just profit. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Howard leaned forward. "And if we reject this proposal?" Grayson didn't flinch. "Then I'll step down." Gasps rippled across the table. "You would leave the company you built?" one board member asked. "I already missed 6 years of my children's lives," he replied. "I won't miss another day." The vote was taken. 12 minutes later, Victoria walked into Grayson's office, eyes wide. 8-5, she said. He stood. "Against?" She shook her head, smiling. "In favor." Grayson closed his eyes, not in relief but in gratitude. He had won something greater than a vote. He had won the right to live a different kind of life. Later that evening, he returned to the hospital with a bouquet of sunflowers and a paper bag full of Theo's favorite muffins. When he stepped into the room, Caleb sat up, eyes lighting up. "You came back." "I promised I would." Caleb grinned. "I told Mom you'd come." Lena looked at him from her chair, her smile soft and full of something unspoken. Grayson walked over, pulled the sketch from his coat pocket, the one Caleb had drawn before the recital, and handed it back. "I kept it with me during the meeting," and he said, "I think it helped." Caleb looked at his drawing, then back at his dad. "Did they say yes?" Grayson nodded. "They did." Caleb's smile widened. "I told you it was a good drawing." Grayson laughed. "You were right." That night, when he drove home under the starlit sky, Grayson didn't think about revenue or risk or boardroom deals. He thought about piano keys, about juice boxes in a cooler, about 3 boys who had changed the direction of his entire life. He had spent years building a future in his name. Now he was building one in theirs. The next few weeks moved both slowly and all at once. Grayson found himself in unfamiliar territory, not in a different country, but in a different rhythm of life. His schedule, once ruled by precision and corporate chaos, now bowed to bedtime routines, peanut butter preferences, and last-minute school projects made entirely of popsicle sticks and glitter. And he loved it. He traded in his penthouse for a brownstone just 6 blocks from Lena's home. It wasn't flashy or enormous, but it had a wraparound porch, a fireplace in the den, and enough rooms for 3 curious boys who immediately claimed it as Dad's base camp. The first weekend they spent there was chaotic and perfect. Lucas demanded pizza and an epic movie night. Milo insisted on reading aloud an entire space encyclopedia, complete with questions about black holes Grayson couldn't quite answer. Theo said nothing at all. He wandered the house slowly, inspecting each room. He stood in Grayson's study, touching the edges of the polished desk, the rows of books, the framed drawing from his recital now proudly displayed. "Did you really quit your job?" he asked one evening, standing in the doorway in his pajamas. Grayson looked up from a book. "I didn't quit," he said gently. "I changed it." Theo frowned. "Why, dog?" Grayson closed the book and stood. "Because being your dad, is more important than being a CEO." Theo looked at him, long and searching. And then, for the first time, he walked forward and wrapped his arms around Grayson's waist. No words, just a hug. And in that quiet moment, Grayson felt something shift inside him. The kind of healing no company could ever offer. The changes at Welder Tech rippled outward like waves. The company's new family-first policy became a national story. Some investors left, others joined. The media was split. Some called it revolutionary, others reckless. But Grayson didn't care. He wasn't building headlines anymore. He was building roots. And those roots deepened with each bedtime story, each burned pancake, each, "Dad, can I show you something?" At night, he often sat on the porch with Lena after the boys were asleep. They talked about everything and nothing, the early days, the mess they'd made, and the life they were now shaping from its broken pieces. "I keep waiting for you to go back to being the Grayson I used to know," Lena admitted one night, her voice soft in the breeze. He smiled, watching the stars. "I think I'm becoming the one I was supposed to be." She glanced at him sideways. "You still scare me sometimes." "Because I'm afraid this isn't real, that it's a phase. That one day you'll wake up and want Tokyo again." Grayson reached for her hand. "I used to fly around the world looking for something that felt like home," he said. "I didn't realize it was here the whole time." They sat in silence, not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that means everything's okay. One Sunday morning, Ryan raced into the kitchen with wild excitement. "Dad, We have to go outside. You have to see what we built. Grayson followed all three boys into the backyard. There, under the maple tree, stood a makeshift clubhouse made from cardboard, duct tape, and pure imagination. We named it the Wilder Fort, Lucas explained. It's for inventors only. And brave people, Milo added. And people who never leave, Theo said, looking directly at Grayson. Grayson knelt down in front of them, overcome. I'm honored. Theo handed him a crayon-scribbled sign. Wilder family only. No work stuff allowed. Grayson smiled, tears stinging his eyes. No work stuff, he said softly. Deal. It happened on a crisp Saturday morning, just as pancakes were sizzling, and Lucas was pretending the syrup bottle was a walkie-talkie. The doorbell rang. Lena, still in her apron and slippers, wiped her hands and walked to the front door, calling over her shoulder, probably the mail. Ryan, don't pour the syrup on the dog. But when she opened the door, her entire body stiffened. Mom? Dad? Standing there were Ellen and Thomas Whitmore, her parents. Their suitcases sat on the porch. Her mother's eyes were wide with surprise. Her father's brows were already drawn low in suspicion. We were in Providence for a conference, Ellen said cheerily, though her tone carried the unmistakable note of apparent ambush. Thought we'd stop by and see our grandchildren. Lena blinked. You didn't call. Thomas shrugged. Wanted to see the real deal. No time to tidy the story. Before Lena could answer, three squealing boys burst into the hallway. Grandma! Grandpa! Milo shouted, launching himself at Ellen's waist. You're really here, Ryan added. Theo didn't say anything, but he hovered close, clearly pleased. Lena forced a smile and stepped aside. Come in. And then right on cue, the back door opened, and in walked Grayson, flour on his cheek, holding a spatula in one hand and a stack of freshly flipped pancakes in the other. He stopped cold when he saw them. Oh, he said. Hi. Thomas crossed his arms. Ellen blinked. You must be Grayson. Grayson nodded. That's me. He set the pancakes down on the counter, and the room filled with a sudden heavy silence. The boys, oblivious to the tension, grabbed their grandparents' hands and began tugging them into the kitchen. Dad made pancakes, Ryan chirped, with chocolate chips. Thomas raised an eyebrow. He cooks? Pretty good too, Milo confirmed. Grayson stood awkwardly beside the stove, unsure whether to sit, run, or offer juice. Eventually, everyone settled around the table. The boys chatted away, stacking syrup and bacon onto their plates, while the adults sat stiffly, sipping coffee. So, Thomas finally said, staring directly at Grayson, you vanished for 6 years and now you're flipping pancakes. That about sum it up? Lena groaned quietly. Dad, no, it's okay, Grayson said gently. It's fair. He looked Thomas in the eye. I wasn't ready then. I thought ambition was everything. I thought love could wait. I was wrong. Thomas didn't soften. And now? Now I know better, Grayson said. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Ellen's voice, softer, cut in. And what about the company? The billions? Isn't that still important? It used to be, Grayson admitted. But the most valuable thing I've ever built is sitting at this table, with sticky fingers and chocolate on their faces. Ellen smiled faintly. Thomas didn't. He leaned in, eyes sharp. I don't care about your billions, Mr. Wilder. I care about my daughter and my grandsons. If you hurt them again, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you never get close to them again. Grayson nodded slowly. I wouldn't expect anything less. A long pause followed. Then Theo, who had been silently buttering his pancake, looked up and said, Grandpa, Dad stayed with me at the hospital all night. Everyone turned to him, even when he had a big meeting. Thomas blinked. Ellen looked at Grayson with new eyes. He didn't leave, Theo continued. Not once. The air shifted. Lena reached under the table and took Grayson's hand, softly without looking at him. Thomas leaned back in his chair, watching the man across from him, with less suspicion now and more consideration. Maybe this wasn't the same Grayson Wilder who had left. Maybe, just maybe, he was the one who stayed. It was Milo's idea. Can we visit your office, Dad? He asked one Saturday morning, perched on the kitchen counter, with a juice box in one hand and a plastic dinosaur in the other. My office? Grayson blinked, halfway through scrambling eggs. You really want to see it? Lucas piped up from under the table where he was building a cardboard rocket. Do you have a laser lab? No, Grayson chuckled, but I do have a coffee machine that talks. All three boys gasped. Theo, who usually kept a healthy distance from excitement, nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we should see it, just to verify. Grayson exchanged a look with Lena, who stood leaning against the fridge, arms crossed and smiling. What do you think? He asked. They're already dressed, she shrugged. Might as well let them inspect the kingdom. An hour later, they walked into the sleek glass tower that had once been Grayson's entire world. Security guards blinked in surprise as the CEO entered, not with a briefcase and Bluetooth headset, but with three boys in dinosaur t-shirts, two backpacks full of snacks, and a glittery water bottle Grayson had somehow been assigned to carry. Sir, the receptionist said, eyes wide, do you need a conference room? Grayson smiled. No, I'm just here with my board of directors. Lucas waved. We're his sons. Do you have secret elevators? We'll find out, Grayson said, hitting the button. They toured the offices, the boys running ahead and peeking into open meeting rooms like explorers charting a new land. Milo lingered at the whiteboard in the development room, adding a smiley face to someone's marketing flowchart. Theo took a clipboard and wandered down the hallway, mumbling things like efficiency, rest zones, and why do grown-ups drink so much coffee? But it was Lucas who climbed into the chair at the head of the main boardroom table, spun once and declared, I now call this meeting of Wilder Tech to order. Grayson sat beside him, half laughing, half melancholy. Just a few months ago, that table had been the only place he felt powerful. Now, it was just a table. Lucas tapped the wood. Dad, do you like being the boss? Grayson thought for a moment. I used to, but now I like being yours more. Lucas considered this. Can you do both? Trying to figure that out, Grayson said. Theo appeared beside them with a stack of sticky notes. I wrote some rules. If people work here, they have to go home for dinner. Also, there should be a nap room, with blankets. Milo added, and no yelling, only whisper yelling. Grayson grinned. I'll pass those on to HR. Victoria poked her head in through the doorway. Should I prepare the press release? Don't tempt me, Grayson replied. She walked in, eyes scanning the boys. So these are the minds behind the campus initiative. Founders and chief mischief officers, he said proudly. Victoria knelt down to their level. You should know, your dad is trying to change the way people work, so moms and dads can come home in time for bedtime stories. Milo blinked. He's making grown-ups be less boring? Basically, she smiled. Theo looked at his dad. That's kind of cool. Grayson swallowed the lump in his throat. Coming from Theo, that was the equivalent of a standing ovation. As they rode the elevator down later, Lucas leaned against Grayson's side. Can we come again? Anytime, Grayson said. Theo nodded. Next time we bring clipboards. I have more ideas. Grayson laughed. I'll make you employee badges. Real ones? Milo gasped. Realer than real. And as they spilled back out into the city afternoon, full of giggles and sidewalk chalk ideas for office water slides, Grayson realized something profound. He hadn't brought his sons into his world. They had brought him into theirs, and he never wanted to leave again. The crowd gathered early. It was a cool, golden morning in late September, the kind where summer still whispered in the sunlight. But fall had already begun to crisp the air. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the freshly trimmed lawn. Blue and white banners flapped gently in the breeze. A small stage stood beneath a grand oak tree, decorated with a simple sign in block letters. The Bennett Family Innovation Campus. A new way to work. A better way to live. Grayson stood at the edge of it all, heart pounding, not with nerves, but with something bigger. Hope. In the distance, he saw Lena walking across the grass with the boys. Lucas was carrying a bundle of balloons. Milo held a clipboard. Theo walked a few steps behind, solemn and focused, carrying the most important thing of all, 3 tiny pairs of red-handled scissors. As they reached the swing, Grayson leaned down and whispered, You ready? Lucas nodded eagerly. I've been practicing my cutting all week. Dad, Milo added, can we say something too? Grayson smiled. Of course, this day belongs to all of us. The audience began to settle, employees, families, community leaders, journalists. Victoria stood at this mic, her voice clear and proud. We've always said our company was built for the future, she began. Today, that future has a playground, a library, a daycare, and a garden. It has bedtime stories and school recitals. It has space for parents to be present. And it all started because one man changed everything for the people he loves. She turned toward Grayson. Please welcome our CEO, Grayson Wilder. The applause was warm, not thunderous, not obligatory, genuine. Grayson stepped up, the boys flanking him. He didn't have a script, just a heart full of stories. I used to think success meant power, he began. Then I thought it meant wealth. But now I know success is something else entirely. He turned, looking at his sons. It's three small voices calling you dad. It's missing a meeting to make a memory. It's building a life, not just a brand. A hush fell over the crowd. This campus is our promise. That work will never again cost you the chance to us there, to be home. He stepped aside and motioned to the boys. Lucas cleared his throat dramatically. We declare this place open for work and hugs and sandwiches. Milo added, and no yelling on Zoom calls. Theo said nothing, but he looked up at his dad, then back at the crowd, and gave a small, serious nod. That was his speech. It was enough. The ribbon stretched across the front walk. Grayson held it steady as his sons each took a pair of scissors in hand. The crowd leaned forward. 1, he whispered. 2, Lena echoed beside him. 3, the boys shouted. Snip, the ribbon fluttered down like falling feathers. The crowd erupted into applause, but Grayson didn't hear it. He was looking at Lena. She wasn't clapping. She was just smiling. This quiet, tear-bright smile that held years of pain, strength, and finally, something new. Peace, she mouthed. You did it. Grayson shook his head slowly. We did. Not every chapter of a great story ends in confetti or applause. Some of them end in grilled cheese sandwiches, spilled juice, and a chorus of bedtime yawns that echoed down the hallway like a lullaby. And that's exactly what Grayson Wilder began to cherish most, the quiet days. It started with mornings. Gone were the early alarms and rushed espresso shots. Instead, Grayson rose to the sound of small feet padding down the hall and a voice, usually Lucas, shouting, It did! Milo stole my sock again! He would stumble into the kitchen, hair still messy, wearing an old sweatshirt that Theo had dubbed retirement mode, and begin the morning routine. Waffles, lunch boxes, a missing shoe hunt, and then came the drive to school. They took the longer road on purpose, past the duck pond, the bakery with the cinnamon roll smell, and the bookstore where they sometimes stopped just for 5 minutes and always ended up 30 late. The boys would argue about music, with Lucas insisting on action movie soundtracks, and Milo secretly slipping in a podcast about dinosaurs. Theo just stared out the window, content with the rhythm of the ride, occasionally offering commentary like, the clouds look like octopuses today. Grayson soaked it all in, the questions, the chaos, the stillness, and most of all, the way his name, Dad, now came so naturally from their lips. After drop-off, Grayson would head to the new campus. He often brought coffee to the on-site childcare center or wandered into the break room just to chat with employees who were adjusting to this new reality. Many of them were still stunned to find themselves in a workplace that honored bedtime over bottom lines. He would see mothers nursing in quiet rooms, fathers helping with homework between meetings. He saw laughter, balance, breathing room, and he saw something else too, healing. One day, a junior designer named April stopped him in the hallway. I wanted to thank you, she said, voice shaking a little. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid of missing something important with my son. Grayson didn't know what to say at first, so he just nodded, then added, that's why we built it. Evenings were his favorite. When the boys returned from school, the house filled with energy. Ryan would explode through the door with stories. Milo would already have 3 books under his arm, and Theo would offer a silent but intentional bump of his shoulder as he walked past, his quiet version of a hug. They would eat together at the table, real meals, not takeout eaten over a laptop, sometimes messy, sometimes burnt, but always together. And then came the bedtime routine. Grayson read to them each night, usually whatever Milo picked, although Lucas often changed the story halfway through. Theo liked to be last, to sit quietly beside him and listen with a furrowed brow as if the words carried secrets only he could decode. One night, as Grayson closed the final page of The Little Prince, Theo asked softly, were you lonely before us? The question struck so suddenly, Grayson had to pause. He looked at his son, at the boy who had once kept his distance, who had once feared his love might not be real. Yes, he answered honestly. I was very lonely. Theo nodded like he understood something deeper than his 6 years should allow. But not anymore? Grayson shook his head. Not anymore. Theo leaned against him and he didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Sometimes after the boys had gone to bed, Grayson and Lena sat in the living room, lights dimmed, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, and the quiet hum of the city outside. They talked, sometimes about the past, about who they were and how far they'd come, sometimes about the future, about the boys, about dreams they hadn't said out loud in years. Other times they didn't speak at all. They just sat together. In the kind of silence only two people who've truly forgiven each other can share. One night, Grayson looked over and asked, "Do you ever think we were supposed to end up like this?" Lena tilted her head. What, like a broken clock that still tells the right time twice a day? He laughed. Exactly like that. She smiled, leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know, she said, but I do know this feels like home. He kissed the top of her head. So do you. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, one of those mid-autumn days where the trees wear fire-colored jackets and the sky hangs a little closer to the earth. Grayson had just returned from a parent-teacher meeting at the boys' school. He was still getting used to hearing things like, Mr. Wilder, Lucas's reading comprehension is improving, or Theo prefers independent work, or Milo would like to build a telescope in the science lab. It was all so normal, and yet it felt like magic. As he walked into Lena's house that evening, arms full of takeout and a stack of signed permission slips, the boys greeted him with shouts of "Deh," and the unmistakable sound of Lego bricks crashing in some unseen room. Lena emerged from the hallway, brushing flour off her jeans. Hey, she said, how'd the meeting go? He smiled, leaning over to kiss her cheek. They're little geniuses, no surprise there. I was hoping you'd say that, she grinned, because you're in charge of homework tonight. I have a PTA email battle to fight. I accept my fate. But just as he turned toward the living room, Milo's voice rang out from the staircase. Dad, wait! Grayson turned. Milo was holding a piece of paper. We made something at school, he said, walking carefully down the steps. And our teacher said we could decide who to give it to. Grayson knelt as Milo handed him the sheet. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures, one with curly hair, one holding a book, and one with glasses, stood between 2 larger figures. Above them, in crayon and a bit of glitter, were the words, Our family, Mom, Dad, and us. Grayson stared at it, breath caught. Milo pointed to the tall figure on the right. That's you. Theo and Lucas appeared behind him, peeking over his shoulder. You're part of our family now, Lucas said simply. Grayson looked at them, at their wide eyes, their hopeful faces, and then his voice broke. I'm honored, more than you know. Theo, quiet as always, said, There's one more thing. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small, square envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn certificate with uneven lines and a purple fingerprint at the bottom. Official Dad membership. Signed, Lucas, Milo, Theo. Date, today. You're not just our dad, Milo said. You're our real dad now. Grayson couldn't speak. He didn't even try. He just pulled all 3 boys into his arms and held them tight, his heart so full it ached. From the hallway, Lena watched, eyes misty, hand over her mouth. Later that night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet again, Grayson walked into the kitchen, where Lena stood washing a dish, lost in thought. I've been thinking, he said, pulling something from his jacket. It was a small velvet box. She turned, startled. What? He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. No diamonds, no grandeur, just a slender band of gold. I'm not asking for anything big, he said. Not yet. Not even a wedding date, just your hand, your trust. A promise that this time, I'm not leaving. Lena's eyes filled instantly. You already have my trust, she whispered. Then let me earn your forever. She stepped forward and placed her hand in his. I think, she said, voice trembling, you already have. And as he slipped the ring onto her finger in the middle of a quiet kitchen, with only the hum of the fridge to witness it, Grayson Wilder finally became everything he never thought he could be. A man with a home, a father with a future, and a love that had waited just long enough to come back. It started with a question from Lucas at breakfast. Have we ever gone anywhere together? Like, far? Grayson looked up from his coffee. You mean like the grocery store? Lucas rolled his eyes. No, I mean like a real trip, with snacks and maps. Milo, already halfway through his cereal, nodded. And walkie-talkies and backpacks. Theo didn't say anything, but his spoon paused midair. Grayson looked at Lena, who was just pouring orange juice. Their eyes met. She raised an eyebrow. Well, she said, I guess it's time, isn't it? They chose a quiet cabin by Lake Sunridge, a few hours north, tucked between forests and the kind of silence you can't buy in the city. Grayson had rented the whole place for the weekend, a weathered wooden lodge with a stone fire pit, bunk beds for the boys, and enough room for pillow fights, hide and seek, and peace. The drive up was its own adventure. Lucas asked a question every 3 minutes. Milo narrated the trip like a documentary. And here we pass yet another exit sign. Notice the curve of the ramp. Theo played DJ, cycling between classical piano pieces and the Jurassic Park soundtrack. Grayson drove with a smile he didn't even realize was there until Lena leaned over and whispered, You've been humming for 20 minutes. At the cabin, everything slowed down. There were no meetings, no emails, no performance reviews, only marshmallows and muddy shoes. They built a fire that night and roasted s'mores. Lucas dropped his twice. Milo drew constellations in the ash. Theo sat closest to the flames, eyes flickering with thought. I like it here, he said suddenly. It's quiet. Grayson handed him another marshmallow. Me too, buddy. The next morning, they went canoeing. Grayson had never been in a canoe before, which the boys found hilarious. You're paddling backward, Milo announced. You're splashing the whole lake, Lucas squealed. Theo, calmly seated at the front, offered no comment, but he gave a thumbs up when they didn't capsize. Later, they hiked a short trail up to a lookout point. The boys raced ahead while Lena and Grayson followed, walking slowly. You know, she said, they're going to remember this forever. He glanced at her. So will I. At the top, the view was breathtaking. Endless trees, a mirror-like lake, the sky wide open. The boys stood in a row, wind in their hair, arms outstretched like eagles. And Grayson, watching them, arms wrapped around Lena's shoulders, felt something he hadn't even known he was waiting for, wholeness. Not just joy, not just love, but a sense that every broken part of him had finally come together. They spent the evening playing board games by the fire. Lucas won Clue. Milo built a Lego bear. Theo fell asleep on the couch, a blanket half draped over him, and Grayson carried him to bed. Later, he sat on the front porch alone, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. Lena joined him. You okay? She asked. He nodded. I'm better than okay. He turned to her. I didn't know life could be like this, that I could still have all this. She leaned into his shoulder. Well, she whispered, now you do. And together under a sky scattered with stars, they sat in the silence of something rare and beautiful. A family. The decision came quietly. There was no dramatic revelation, no crisis, no wake-up call. Just a simple moment, one Sunday afternoon, when Grayson stood at the kitchen island with 3 boys drawing spaceships and Lena humming softly to a jazz record, and he realized this was everything. And if anything ever happened to him, he wanted to be sure they'd always know that he chose them every day, every time. He met with his attorney the following week. Are you sure you want to make it this personal? The man asked, flipping through the revised documents. Grayson smiled. It's the most personal thing I've ever done. He had rewritten his will, transformed it, really. Yes, there were trusts. Yes, the company would be in secure hands. But that wasn't the part that mattered. The part that mattered was the letter enclosed inside, marked for 3 boys with chocolate sticky fingers and constellation bright eyes. It read, To Lucas, Milo, and Theo, by the time you read this, I hope I've told you 1,000 times how much I love you. But just in case, here it is again. I love you, more than all the companies in the world, more than all the planes I ever flew on, more than all the meetings I used to think were important. I was once a man who chased success so hard, I almost missed the greatest one of all, being your dad. You taught me that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in bedtime stories, in being there when you fall, in showing up, even when it's inconvenient. And if you ever find yourselves at a crossroads, wondering what matters most, I hope you remember, it's not the deal, it's not the title, it's not the house, the car, or the paycheck, it's love. Choose the people who make you laugh, who challenge you to grow, who show up when it rains. Choose the life that fills your heart, not just your calendar. And know this, I was proud of a lot of things in my life, but nothing made me prouder than hearing you call me Dad. Love, Grayson. He sealed the letter, placed it in an envelope with their names, and tucked it into a small wooden box on his desk. The same one where he kept their recital drawings, their birthday cards, and 3 pairs of tiny baby socks he'd never had the chance to see them wear. Legacy, he realized, wasn't something you left behind. It was something you built, day by day, hug by hug, story by story. In his, it wasn't carved into skyscrapers or stock prices. It was living, breathing, laughing upstairs, waiting for him to finish paperwork and come help build a rocket ship out of cereal boxes. It was a Tuesday, not a holiday, not a birthday, not a moment anyone would mark on a calendar, just a Tuesday. But sometimes the most unforgettable moments are born from the ordinary. The boys were home early from school. Rain had closed the playground and canceled after-school activities. The living room was a mess of blankets, paper airplanes, and hot cocoa mugs. Lena was upstairs on a video call for a freelance project. Grayson, freshly home from the office, loosened his tie, set his briefcase down, and blinked at the scene. Lucas was upside down on the couch reading a comic. Milo was curled up in the armchair, glasses slipping off his nose. Theo was sprawled on the floor, sketching planets onto the back of a cereal box. "All right," Grayson said, shaking off the drizzle from his coat. "Who wants grilled cheese?" 3 hands shot up. Me too. I'll help." They migrated to the kitchen like a parade of noise and limbs and crayons somehow still in pockets. As they cooked, Grayson gave each boy a task. Lucas manned the toaster, Milo buttered bread, and Theo read out loud from the Dad's Ultimate Sandwich recipe Milo had written earlier that week in science class. And just as Grayson flipped the last sandwich onto a plate, it happened. Milo looked up, not shy, not nervous, just full of light. And he said, "Hey, Dad." Grayson turned, drying his hands on a towel. "Yeah, buddy?" "I think this is my favorite day." Grayson smiled. "Mine too." Lucas added, "It's not even special." Theo, without looking up from his drawing, said quietly, "Yes, it is." Grayson blinked, something catching in his chest, because they weren't trying to impress him. They weren't waiting to be reassured. They weren't even thinking about the past. They were just here, with him. And all 3 of them had called him Dad, like it had always been that way, like it would always be. He set down the towel and crouched beside them, pulling them gently into a huddle. And for a moment, none of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows. The scent of butter and bread hung warm in the air. The world beyond their walls could have vanished, and none of them would have noticed. Because in that ordinary kitchen, on that unremarkable Tuesday, something extraordinary had happened. A family had finished becoming one. No declarations, no confetti. Just 3 boys, 1 man, and a word that now belonged to them all, Dad. As the years would go by, there would be milestones. Concerts, graduations, first heartbreaks, job offers, maybe even weddings. But whenever someone asked Grayson Wilder when he knew, with complete certainty, that he had finally arrived at the life he was meant to live, he would smile softly and say, "It was a rainy Tuesday in a messy kitchen when 3 voices called me Dad without needing to ask if they could."